I'm Isabella and you're listening to Zeno. Each month I have conversations with people from all walks of life about their personal stories of home, identity and the search for belonging. Soraya Abdel-Hadi, welcome to the show. How do you describe yourself and the work that you do?
Oh, it's a big question. I'm a writer, a creative, community builder, feel like artist, coach, and facilitator and host. But generally all of my work is focused around nature and people.
So how do you answer the question, where are you from? And when you answer that question, what truths are missing?
When people ask me where I'm from, I say Hampshire, which is both true and also, I guess, a bit provocative because I've just been sick of being asked it all the time. And then when they say, where are you really from? I say Frimley. So do you want to get really specific? I know what people are usually asking when they ask that. And if you're being asked by somebody else who is mixed race or a person of colour or someone who is obviously from another country, the level of that question is just different. It hits different, I think. You kind of know because you've probably already been talking about background and heritage and how you've ended up in this space or any of those types of things. And then it comes up a bit more naturally. Whereas, yeah, it's quite an intrusive question, isn't it? So what am I leaving out? All the other parts of my heritage. So my mum is white British. My dad is black Sudanese. And so I'm mixed race. I've always considered myself to be mixed race, but I'm also mixed race British because I was born here. I grew up here. It's an interesting thing to be from, as we know, to be from different cultures and be asked that question. Which part are you most interested in? Well, you're obviously asking me because I'm brown, but actually both sides of my identity are equal.
The person who's asking the question, it's rooted in their perception.
Yes, exactly that. It's a way of trying to put people in boxes, I think.
And what would you say helps you to feel most grounded in your sense of belonging?
It's interesting actually, and I have been very fortunate until very recently in that I've never really felt like I didn't belong. And that's because I think belonging and fitting in are two very different things. So to me, there's an element in belonging of ownership, like this is my space and I'm allowed to be in it. And I was very fortunate when I was growing up that there was never any suggestion that I should be anywhere other than where I was or doing what I was doing. So although I was aware that maybe over time was aware that other people might have had a perception that I didn't belong, I always felt like I did belong.
And that's such an interesting distinction. I mean, it makes sense, but I never thought about it that way, of belonging and fitting in being different things. One is, like you say, it's guided in your sense of self and how you assert yourself in whatever space or activity that might be. And then with fitting in, it's assimilation. And it's such a wonderful way to look at it because it means that it is always going back to the self. It is going back to feeling okay to assert yourself. And you don't always have to fit in. What would you say are your earliest memories of feeling like an outsider or that you didn't fit in?
So when I was at primary school, probably my first memory of being othered was a boy that I didn't know from a different year. He just walked up to me in the corridor and was like, he literally just said to me, Blackie, and then just stood there. And I looked back at him and I'd never heard that term before. And I wasn't offended because I didn't know I was supposed to be offended. And he stood there and he was obviously expecting some sort of reaction. And I didn't have a reaction for him. So we just kind of stood there staring at each other.
Oh my God.
Which
This
on
is
reflection is weird.
tragic.
Yeah. Like on reflection it's super weird. But I was just a bit like, I'm sorry, what did he just say to me? And what does that even mean? Yes, I am brown. Like, do you know what I mean? So I guess that's my first example of that. And then the other side was, and I don't even remember what triggered it, but something happened and I was much older, probably a teenager. And I came home and I just had this realization that when people looked at me, they saw something different to how I felt, if that makes sense. And I remember that sweeping horror type feeling. Like, hang on, they don't see me as me. They see something completely different. But I have no idea even what triggered that, which is really interesting because I can't remember the incident. I just remember the processing afterwards.
I think the poet Anthony Anaxagorou has a great phrase for this. He talks about a sense of racial puberty. It's a very confusing period in our lives as we're growing up where we're suddenly understanding how we're perceived and understanding our bodies as racialized bodies in different spaces. And that to me is very interesting. And it's so crazy because when you ask that question, what are your earliest memories? It always goes to that point. It always goes to that point of racial puberty. We're going to touch on your work with All the Elements because that's an area that I'm really interested in hearing about, particularly in your relationship to nature and belonging. What would you say are your more complex or knotted parts of your relationship with nature?
My relationship with nature is very much like somebody said to me, can you explain the importance of nature to you or something? And I had quite a strong reaction to that. I was like, the importance of nature, it's vital. It's not separate from us. It is something which is part of us, so entwined and so part of us that it could never be taken away. I can't imagine a world where I'm not immersed in nature in some way on a very regular basis. And I'm in awe of it. I love it. I am inspired by it. I feel relaxed when I get to spend time in it. I feel scared for it. So all of those things.
And so is the perhaps more complex or knotted or difficult aspects around that sense of ecogrief?
I have a complicated relationship with conservation, sustainability, which is my background, and all of these ideas of holding things as a single thing that needs to remain the same until the end of time. So I'm scared for the depletion of biodiversity, but I'm not worried about change, if that makes sense. So I'm scared that we'll end up with one type of grass everywhere, which then can't sustain all of the life that we need for everything to thrive and live. I'm not scared about the fact that I'm scared about our changing climate and I'm scared about the world as a whole, but I'm not scared about the fact that because of our changing climate, we have changing plants, changing animals, evolution. The problem is that most of our wild things can't evolve quickly enough to adapt. So do I suffer from eco-anxiety? I would say probably not so much anymore. I have come to a place where, and it's not the most cheerful, but that I don't think we're going to save the world. I'm doing that in inverted commas. I don't think it's possible to do so. I don't think we're going to change everything quickly enough. But I do think that we can soften the landing for us. I think we can reduce suffering for a huge number of people, a huge number of animals, a huge amount of the planet. I think there are so many positive and amazing things we can do for that. So I guess the eco anxiety I used to have was like, how are we going to turn this around? And I'm like, no, it feels much more possible to look at it from a place of being like, how can we make this better for everybody?
It's amazing to hear that you've reached that point emotionally with it. So what are you exploring currently in that space?
I think we just need to talk more. This is my thing. And it's been something that's been complicated for me with All the Elements as well, because there are two very different things here. There's All the Elements as a collective of amazing people doing amazing things and different approaches and different opinions and different things going on, different priorities. And then there's me as an individual activist, and how do I feel about what needs to be talked about, what we need to be working on, which direction we should be pushing in. And that's both social and environmental. So I think the complications come from finding a way to share through my voice about the things that need to happen, and not being worried about that not being everyone's opinion, because I'm voicing my opinion. Whereas on All the Elements side, I'm always repping lots of people and lots of different opinions. So I refer to it sometimes as being like diversity Switzerland. And there's like
the good side of Switzerland.
Yes.
Diversity Switzerland.
Yes.
You're having to occupy different roles. You're acting as a spokesperson, you're community building, you're inhabiting a lot of different spaces, but also there's you in that as well. Yeah.
And it's interesting because my work as a coach is very similar. There's no wrong or right for somebody in coaching. Whatever conclusion they come to, whatever approach they decide to take, it comes from them and what they want to do and what they want to see. And there's beauty in that. The diversity of people and opinions and priorities and approaches. I love that. I love that side of my work. So I have to be really careful in making it very clear. I can have those two things. I can love helping people make more change, create different things through All the Elements, collaborate, help them achieve what they want to achieve with their organizations. And I can help individuals develop, grow, work out what's important to them. But that doesn't mean that I can't also, out on the other side, have my own opinion and be able to kind of put that forward.
You're presenting a framework in order to bring out the best of who they are, but still being yourself at the end.
Yes. And authenticity, which I hate the word authentic, actually. When I went back to study my master's, my dissertation was on authentic leadership for women. And one of the funny things about authenticity is you can't be authentic if other people don't see you as authentic. So actually, it's kind of a circular concept, because you could be being fully true to yourself, which is one of the parts of authenticity. But if nobody believes that that's the true version of you, you can never be fully authentic, which...
Wow, that is crazy.
Right? Doesn't make any sense.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But also, what? Like, where are we meant to go with that?
Well, it's because when you think about it, authenticity is something which is judged from the outside. So it is about your actions and how you behave and how you come across. Well, more about how you come across, because somebody else has to view you as authentic for you to be authentic. You can't say well, I guess you could, but in the definition, you can't say, I'm an authentic person. It's like, no, somebody else has to tell you that.
That's so interesting. I think it goes to like the root of leadership as well, because you can't declare yourself a leader. There's no one around you.
Yeah.
Others have to gather around you to then declare you are the leader, you're the chosen one.
Yes, exactly.
So how do you hope to inhabit a sense of leadership in that way? And what are your hopes for the future of the All the Elements community?
I think I never put myself forward to be a leader of All the Elements. The idea was always that it was community driven, community led, and definitely the knowledge we have within the community sits in every single individual who is part of it. I guess my role, if I was going to say anything regarding leadership, is to coordinate experiences for people. It is everything that I actually just talked about. It's speaking on behalf of people who might not be in the room. I went to a talk recently and they said, you want people who are going to say your name in spaces that you can't access. That's what you want. And I was like, that's so interesting, because that is what I try to do for community members. Not because they couldn't do that necessarily themselves, but because All the Elements is an organization, the sector organizations, they're having one place to go to be able to ask, if that makes sense. They get overwhelmed with the number of grassroots groups there are. They don't know who to ask, who to approach. And so they come to me so I can be that person in those rooms to be like, hey, look at all these amazing people doing amazing things. Or you're looking for this specific thing. Here's the person that you need to speak to. It's kind of an advocate. And then also talking about the challenges that we all face, but I don't have, because of where I am in my career, because of the type of work I do, I can be a little bit more outspoken about things that are impacting other people in the community that they might be concerned about raising because of the impact it might have on their work with brands or organizations or other people. I have very little fear. That's not true. But I probably have less fear of impacts than a lot of other people are. So I lean into my privilege in that way. Because I have that privilege, I should be using it for good things.
Mm. And also, just by virtue of being connected with so many groups and hearing the things that they are experiencing and the challenges they're facing, you're literally presenting the facts of what they're going through. Mm-hmm. You're in a unique position to be able to see what themes are emerging around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's an amazing place to be. It's wonderful to be able to talk to so many people and see what they're working on and really get a feel for what everyone's talking about. I love that. What is the topic of the moment that everyone is talking about? So also it feeds into my personal enjoyment of seeing themes and pulling themes out.
What would you say have been some of your more or most transformative experiences in the outdoors?
Oh, transformative experiences in the outdoors. So the one that I always talk about is when I went Canadian canoeing and paddleboarding on the Mississippi. And we camped on sandbars and we were really far away from everybody. We didn't see anybody apart from the really big grain barges that went past us for the whole time we were there, which was incredible from an immersive perspective. I think some of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen have been when I used to be walking my dog really early in the morning. I remember Christmas morning one day, I went to this local walk and it was foggy and misty and the light was coming through the trees and it was just so beautiful. And I was there a little bit earlier than a lot of people. And so I managed to walk through it. I came back down. And as other people were arriving, it had all burned off. And I was like, you missed it. It was so good.
No pun intended.
Yeah, yes.
I love that. And I think for me, I find that that's one of the most powerful aspects of the more than human world and being in the outdoors is how immersive it is. The words just left me is that there's this Japanese concept of losing oneself, the loss of the self that you experience when you're in an outdoor space or in a wild space. I think everybody should have access to.
Yes. Yes. And you have to see the same place. I know some people might disagree with me on this, but I think you need to see the same place in all different seasons, all different weathers to really fully feel like that. Some people get it from being on a mountain, don't they? And they're like, God, it was so amazing. I had this amazing view, all of those sorts of things. For me, I find, so since my dog died, I'm in nature a lot less because I was obviously going out. It didn't matter what the weather was like. Didn't have to have it's sunny, maybe I'll go outside. I was just like, oh God, it's 8 a.m, off we go on our walk, no matter what the weather was. And some of the most amazing experiences were when I wasn't expecting them to be amazing, when I was literally walking in the pouring rain and then suddenly it stopped raining and there was an amazing rainbow and all the birds were back out. So I think you need to experience the same place in lots of different seasons and lots of different weathers and lots of different ways, times of the day, to really feel that whole, oh, nature keeps going. It's not about me and my experience today. It's about what nature's doing.
That way, it's building a sense of intimacy with a place, because in a similar way that you see someone multiple times and you build a relationship with someone, when you're in a place over various seasons and seeing how it changes, you're building a kinship with that place. And I love what you talked about your experience with your dog, because there's a book that, if you've not read it yet, you will absolutely love it. It's called, it's called The Writing Life and a Dog Called Fig.
Ah, that sounds amazing.
Have you?
I have not read it.
I apologize in advance if I've mispronounced the name of the book. I'll put it in the show notes. But this book was recommended by someone who I very much look up to, who's a geopsychotherapist and author, writer. She recommended the book, and I read this book, and I grew up with dogs. I had 3 dogs growing up. Dogs have a very, very special place in my heart, but also I'm trying to explore my writing, and you're a writer as well. And I tell you, I cried like a baby reading this book. I was like, and Vibe is also at the very end of the book. It just absolutely wrenched my heart out. But there was this many things in the book that were wonderful. So it's kind of the way it's structured is, the author, she's talking about different authors and their dogs and their relationship with their dogs, and how that influenced their writing.
Wow.
And one of the things that she talks about is how dogs help you to be better people and more present, because when you go for a walk with your dog, they're drawn to certain things. They're going to chase a pheasant into the hedge or whatever it is. They're drawn to something, and that leads you to perceive nature through their eyes as well, which builds an intimacy in that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful and true. Although I would say that my dog was, yes, he would do that, but also sometimes he was just completely oblivious. And I'd just be like, oh, look at that cute squirrel that I'm going to watch in the tree. And he'd just be like, la, 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 la. Why have you stopped? So maybe in some ways it was the other way around for us, but definitely the being in nature part. But yeah, that sounds amazing. I'll check it out.
I'll definitely share it with you. Be aware, it's a tearjerker.
Oh no.
What would you say home tastes, sounds, smells and feels like for you?
So I think I would have, when I had my dog at home, so that's what's really interesting for me, because I was like, oh, that's interesting. When I had my dog at home, I would have described my house as home. But when you asked me that question, I was like, oh, I have nothing to say about my house, which is very interesting, isn't it? We have quite a close family, which I think is also partly because my dad's family all live in countries all over the place. And so we don't have them here in the UK. And my mum had one brother. And so we do have family on that side, but there's fewer of them than you might expect in some families. So me, my mum, my dad, my sister and my brother, I feel like when you say home, that's probably home to me. And when you're like, what food? I'm like, oh, a nice restaurant, like a really nice restaurant. It's not at all where you're going with the question, but that is what comes up for me. It's a really nice restaurant, maybe a lazy afternoon, turn up at like 2 or something, catch up on our lives and eat whatever type of food it is and probably bicker a little bit. Sandalwood always reminds me of my dad. Sandalwood perfume. It just sounds like chatting. It's like chatter is what it sounds. Just quite nice, even chatter in the background. Talking about whatever. You can talk about such random things.
You have spoken before in other interviews about your work as an activist, as well as founding All the Elements. What would you say your relationship with burnout is like?
Ha ha. Funny that you would look at my other interviews and ask me about burnout. Better than it has been in the past. I actually feel like, and this is not we call it a endorsement of burnout, but I do feel like I've made some of my better decisions after experiencing burnout, recognizing it, and then making life changes. So in that way, it's an interesting tool, but it would be better if we could recognize things early before we get there. I struggle to manage my brain that wants to do lots and lots of different things and lots of different projects when I also have something which is fixed. So a job that is full-time 5 days a week is what I have discovered bad for me. I mean, good for me. Well, good for my bank account, but bad for me in that I will still do all the projects around that work. And that always leads to burnout. Of course it does, because you're doing a full-time job and then you're also doing all these projects on top. I found it much easier to navigate work, projects, all of those types of things, balance all the elements, balance my freelance work when I have control over my own time. And I can recognize when I need space and when I don't need space, which is ironic because as a freelancer, you work all the time, all the time. But I can take an hour off in the middle of the day, as long as I don't have calls booked in, to go and do something else. Or I can finish early if I don't have anything on, or I can work at night, or I can work on a Saturday morning to take the pressure off of my work in the week. And that works much better for me. So yeah, I've been in and out of burnout for a long time, and I've only just gone back to being fully freelance again at the end of December. And I can definitely feel that my mental well-being and my relationship with work is better. I still wouldn't say that I'm good at it, but it's better. We're on the right trajectory right now.
The reason I ask about it is because I am currently part of a group called Beyond Burnout. And it's through the charity Huddlecraft. It's the second huddle I've done. The first one that I did was on home and belonging.
I remember you talking about this before.
And the Beyond Burnout one, I've not talked about this on the podcast at all. And I think that's because it's very personal. The experience of burnout is so personal. I mean, right now, the phrase is kind of thrown around and used like, oh, you're just burnt out. But really, a person's experience of burnout is very rooted in their relationships, purpose, how you feel in society. What I've realized through this 4-month journey with a group of all of us women, all of us very purpose-led, is it's interesting because it's nuanced. It's different for every single person, your relationship with burnout. But there are so many shared narratives of being in a system. Maybe, for example, you're neurodivergent and you're being forced to work in a corporate culture where there's no room for being neurodivergent. Or you're a teacher who's passionate about educating young people, but there's no budget and you're overworked and underpaid and you're doing admin work most of the time. So the purpose that you felt of wanting to educate the next generation is being removed from you, and that leads to burnout. And I think what I'm trying to understand a bit more, maybe from asking you that question, is how can we be purpose-led and rooted in ourselves as we truly are in the world that we have, in the system that we have?
So I think we just have to trust that other people have also got us and the projects and the things that we're passionate about. And by that, what I mean is, when you're purpose-led, it's really difficult to step back because you feel like you need to do more and more. There's always more to do. And I think that trusting that other people are going to pick up where you aren't able to is so important. And actually, my friend Frankie sent me a cartoon literally 2 days ago. It was a drawing of people singing in a choir. And I'm going to completely massacre whatever the line underneath it was because I can't remember it exactly. But basically what it was saying is driving forward as a community is about being in a choir, because if you stop working, i.e. you stop singing, the song can still continue. And I was like, it was written much more beautifully than that. But you can imagine.
The essence.
Yeah, that's the essence of it. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And I think that's so important in the types of work that we do when we are trying to make the world better, because we can't do it all ourselves. And also, as we know, if you burn out, you can't do anything. So actually, you're not furthering your cause at all, because you're just going to get to burnout quicker and then not be able to do anything and have to drop everything for a period of time. So
yeah, and the process of retrieving yourself and picking yourself back up and refinding yourself in the depth of burnout is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, true burnout is something I have never experienced, where you have no motivation, you have no creativity, you're so run down that for me, my brain, it's interesting you talk about neurodivergence because I'm quite ADHD. So my brain is going all the time. In burnout, it was not going all the time. In burnout, I would sit down. I remember one specific thing. I went and sat in the garden with my dog because I was like, oh my God, everything is just a lot. I should take time out. Went and sat in the garden and I stared into space and there was nothing. I just had nothing. I had no energy, no thoughts, nothing. And I just remember being like, whoa.
Wow, like what is this?
Yeah, I was like, this is not normal. And it is what my brain needed. I could feel my brain being, oh, thank God. But it was a whole new thing. And that exhaustion and you don't realize when you're in it. I think that's the thing with burnout. So almost when you get to the point where you say I'm burnt out, you're beyond burnout.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very slow process of just awfulness. I'm encouraged by the fact that people are talking about it more now. It's a very nuanced thing, and I look forward to it being better understood because it is so connected to experiences of marginalised people, neurodivergent people, and anybody who's diverse in a difficult system.
Yeah.
So hopefully things will change. But part of the antidote to that is spending more time outdoors and being in nature.
I think what's interesting about what you just said is that what we have kind of implied, but we haven't really talked about, although you talked about neurodivergence, is the fact that if you are from a marginalized community, or if you are neurodiverse, or for any number of different reasons, if you have to mask or code switch, that is exhausting on top of whatever your normal expectations are. So in a normal role, you might already be heading towards burnout. But if you're also having to manage all of those different things, you are on a train to get there so much quicker.
Totally.
It's funny, though, that my story that you just talked about, nature helping you, is about me sitting in my garden and my brain just being like, thank God, we're just in a green space and now we can just flatline.
Yeah, for sure.
This is what I need right now.
Thank you. You recently republished your Substack, Whale Song. In light of your writing and creative writing more generally, what would you say you're exploring creatively at the moment?
Oh, so I started writing again, actually writing a lot. I think I was always writing since I was an equestrian journalist, which was a really long time ago. And I was writing on and off over the years. And in 2019, I think, I realized that when I wrote things, I was writing them in the way that whoever was asking me to write them wanted me to. I'd be like, what's the audience? What's the topic? Yeah, I've got you. I can do that. As a very professional writer, I could deliver you what you needed, but I didn't have a voice. I then developed that voice on my blog over a long period of time. I was very prolific. I wrote a lot. I was writing once, twice, 3 times a week, which for me, when I also had a full-time job, was a lot of writing. I then got an award for my writing from Lonely Planet, and then almost overnight stopped writing. And that was because I was suddenly like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be a travel writer, a good one.
What the hell? Take your award back.
Yeah, I don't want it anymore. I was writing just for me. And now I feel the pressure to also, again, write in a specific way or for a specific audience. Or, people are following me now because I'm a travel writer. I should be a travel writer. And actually, my writing was about travel, sure. And it was about nature connection. It was about local connections as well as all the different things you could do while traveling and mindful travel. But it also was about something I'd seen on TV or someone I'd spoken to down the road or a fun article I'd read, right? Or a cool picture I'd seen. So it didn't feel very travel writery. So coming back round, I have done writing on and off, again, for purpose since I got that award. And I'm very grateful to have received it. It's amazing. I don't mean to take away from that. It's just the pressure. So I decided to restart my Substack actually because I felt like I had something that I personally wanted to talk about again. And so I felt like I could redefine what this is, who I am, the type of writer I am, and what I'm doing. And so I have relaunched it as a way for me to talk about actually quite a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of how do you gather people in a really interesting way? Because I see stuff about this all the time and I'm so interested in it. And it's so relevant to the community and the people I'm talking to all the time. And how do we build new ways of doing things and new systems, as well as talking about things that are happening in the outdoor industry that everyone in the outdoor industry knows are happening, but no one's really talking about because you don't want to upset people. But I don't think it's particularly controversial. Most of them come back to, it would be really nice if people were paid for the work they do. It's like mostly that. And I want to talk about Rory, my dog. I want to talk about losing him and what that was like. And I want to talk about trips that I've done. And so people used to like it when I wrote about things that I was interested in, because actually we're all multifaceted. We're all interested in different things. And people, I think, liked the randomness of what I wrote about before. And I want to bring that, but just with this social and environmental slant to it.
I love that so much. And what a beautiful metaphor for that through whale song. Oh, I love that. It speaks so deeply to that like haunting song that's in the depths somewhere that you can't quite pinpoint. So excited. I'm really excited. And yeah, plug in to subscribe to that and keep abreast of what you write. I'm excited to just keep exploring that with you as well. I'm also trying to write a lot more. Yeah, and also kind of tackle the beast of nature writing, whatever that means today.
Can mean whatever you want it to mean.
Exactly. At the moment, it's taking me to quite dark places.
Oh, that's okay.
That's okay too. Yeah. I think this next question connects a lot with that. Is what is important about finding your own voice and being rooted in that voice?
I think the important thing about finding your own voice is that is what is, I don't know, it's like the essence of you, isn't it? And actually what's interesting is the way you ask that is what's important about finding your own voice. I think what's important about finding your own voice is that it helps you understand yourself better. And I don't think you can find your own voice without doing a lot of whatever it is that is your creative output. Because when you first do it, you're like, it should be like this. And so you try and do a lot of things that are other people. And you're like, it should look like this. It should feel like this. And then you start experimenting. And then you're like, oh my God, this is terrible. If this is my voice, I don't want it to be my voice.
Oh God, put that back where it was.
Yeah, exactly. Please don't look at it. And I'm just going to go over here. And then there's a period, it's mess, a period of mess where you're working out what your voice is and you're not quite emulating what you were looking at before, but you're also not quite yourself. And then the bit that comes out the other end is once you start getting into flow and enjoying it and feeling it and not actually caring. That's the thing that helped me the most. Not caring what people think about it and just being, I was going to use the word authentic then, which I'm not going to, being you. But the importance in a broader sense, so that's the importance of finding your voice. But the importance in a broader sense is that we only hear really a very small subset of the people whose voices need to be heard, and the nuances and the opinions and the different lived experiences. And I don't think we fully understand, because there's not enough of it out in the world yet, how varied that is and how beautiful that is and how different it can be when you don't just ask people from underrepresented backgrounds to talk about being underrepresented.
I completely agree with what you said about to find your voice requires a lot of work in that creative output. In addition to Ruth Allen, who is the geopsychotherapist and author who I spoke about, who is a massive idol for me, I'm not going to stop talking about how amazing she is. She brought me to Melissa Febos' work. Melissa Febos isn't, for people who don't know, she's an author, she's an academic, she taught creative writing at prominent universities. She wrote her memoir called Whip Smart, which is all about her experience as a dominatrix and being addicted to drugs. Just as an academic who was excelling very well in these spaces. And it was a really massive turning point in her career, because it was the writing that always needed to be said, and it is just well acclaimed. It was a fantastic piece of writing. And off the back of that, she started this whole creative writing movement around this. And she recently published a book, maybe a few years ago, called Body Work. And it's about her experience as an author and talking about the importance of memoir writing. And her experience and talking about that, she says that she basically gives people permission to write their own stories. And I think that's kind of what you're hinting at here, is like, we always try to emulate the writing of others because we feel like our own story isn't worth being told. That no one's going to pay attention, nobody cares. You're just a woman who wants to write about your own experience. Why do you even, no one cares about what you have to say. And she kind of gives people permission to write their story, to write the menial or more interesting parts of who you are. And that sense of giving myself permission has allowed me to find my voice so much quicker than if I had been trying to emulate whoever author's already out there. Another thing you said, which I think is so true, is when you find your voice in creativity, in your writing or painting, whatever it is, it flows from you. It comes out so quickly. It's fast. It's not labored. I think when you're trying to emulate other people's work, it feels so heavy and labored. You're trying so hard. You look at one word and you think, is that how they would say it?
Is that how I'm supposed to say it?
Yeah, exactly. I think from the book Animal Joy by Noor El-Zadir, it's one of my favorite books of the year. She talks about that, how your true self, your writing true self, comes out of you quickly and it flows from you. And that has just massive light bulb moment for me.
I think it's interesting because there's a balance there, right? Because that is how I feel about creativity, whether I'm painting or drawing or writing. Writing is definitely my most flow state creative output. But I really enjoy visual arts and building things like that. Crafting and all that sort of thing gets me really excited as well. But I guess I'm not skilled enough, or I don't feel like I'm skilled enough, because that's not true. Don't need to be very skilled to be doing art. See, I just fell into one of my own traps. But I feel like I'm not skilled to the level that I would like to be able to express things in the same way that I am with writing. So I think it's interesting because there is a balance though. Getting to flow is hard. Once you're in a rhythm with creating, you get to flow quicker. It's like something in your brain goes, oh yeah, I get it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And you have more ideas and you can be more creative and all of that sort of thing. However, as somebody who also did used to write for a living, sometimes it's just about showing up, even when there isn't flow. And even if it's just writing a few sentences, I've written some things which are just awful. Not subjectively, oh, Soraya, you think your work's bad. Objectively awful. But that's fine because then I had something to work with the next time I came, and then flow might or may not come. And I think the book is Big Magic. Have you read Big Magic?
Oh, I don't know that.
But talks about this idea of muses. It covers loads of things like muses, struggles as an artist, how it's like put out there you need to be a struggling artist, and there's all of this torture. You need to be tortured to be an artist, and kind of debunks all of that. But also just talks about showing up to do the work. If you are really committed to being creative, you do need to show up sometimes when you just don't feel like showing up. And there's this idea that the muse is sitting around and actually waiting for you to go and sit in front of your computer to write, or wait for you to turn up at the easel. If you're not showing up, then you're not giving inspiration the chance to hit you or take you. So I think it's super interesting. I think there's just flow is amazing and it's my favorite, but it's not always flowy.
Yeah, I think that connects a lot to the author of The War of Art. I've not read it.
I've not read it either.
And also The Artist's Way.
Yeah, both of those are on my to-do list, but because people recommend them all the time, I'm almost a little bit like, are these just cult classics or are they actually useful?
I've heard a lot of good things. Of good things. And my partner's a filmmaker and he has them on his shelf. That is similar concept around the inspiration, something that speaks through you. When it is a pure art, it's bigger than you. And I think how that connects to writing is writing that really speaks to someone is something that is writing that addresses the human condition. It addresses our humanity or what this is all about. And you just got to turn up to your laptop sometimes.
You do just have to show up. And sometimes it's very annoying. And it's usually, I mean, for most of us, especially when you're first starting doing it, you show up at times when you're tired and you haven't made enough time for it and you've run out of time. It's at the end, it's in the evening, or it's first thing in the morning, or it's just at a time that's not convenient, or it's at the end of a long week on a weekend when you're like, all I really want to do is go for a walk, or I want to sit on the sofa and watch Netflix. Not sponsored by Netflix. Or other streaming services are available.
Movie.
Yeah.
Independent cinema on.
Yeah. Exactly.
When it's too late to have a coffee, that's when you have to still show up.
Exactly. But there's such power in that. And I think once you give yourself permission to write about whatever you want and be bad at it for a while, it doesn't feel quite so bad because you can sit down and say, right, even if I just do 200 words, where actually I just did this amazing art journaling course online.
Oh,
so it was set up by Owen Wilson. Although she's just replacing it with something new. She's just doing a new version of it. But one of my favorite pages of it was when you show up for art journaling and you literally have no idea what you want to art journal. She was like, just write the same word over and over and over and over again. And she had shared one of her pages. It was just literally, I won't say it, but it was just an expletive. Just over and over and over again. She was like, I'm just going to write it over and over and over again until I feel like I have something else that I want to say
something
instead.
Else emerges out of the expletive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is something that would be a perfect thing to put above your desk.
Yep. It's great. And actually, it was a really great course because it was looking at what we think about creativity and what we think about journaling, and how you can, if you want to create something in a different way, you want to tell your story in a different way, you want to document your life in a different way, you can. Like, it doesn't have to be what we think about when we think of a diary or a memoir, right? It doesn't have to be like, I got up this morning and this happened and then this happened. It can be collage image of eyes which reminds you of this particular experience that you had during that day, or it could be a sketch of your houseplant because that is something that was important to you at that particular moment, at that particular time. And I love that. It really speaks to the idea that, you know, what is the most important thing? Why do we clutter the story by filling in all these other things that we think should be there again?
What insights have you gained about your sense of belonging?
I think what I've discovered is that the things that people value the most in my work are the things that are very much personally me. And that is mind-blowing to me. I never really thought that. I always thought about writing as a tool to talk about different things and bring things to people's attention. But actually, people want to know people's stories. They want to feel like they really know you and that you are part of their lives. And I also think in an age of social media where everyone's throwing back on social media about how horrid it is and how it's going to be the downfall of the world, I find it is the most amazing space to not only be able to share this version of yourself, which is the truest version. That's what I love about social media, is like, people talk all the time about it being fake. Well, my corner of social media is not fake. I love connecting with other people and really seeing truly what's going on in their lives and what they want to talk about and what they're passionate about. And I get to share what I'm passionate about as well. And we can celebrate each other. And isn't that what it's supposed to be like? I feel like that's what it's supposed to be like.
And what advice would you give to someone who finds themselves unsure of where they belong or how they fit in?
And this goes back to the difference that I feel like there is between belonging and fitting in. You belong. As human beings, we belong on this planet as animals that are part of this bigger ecosystem. You belong, take up space. It's your space. Fitting in is more complicated. I personally think it's a trap. I think you shouldn't worry about fitting in, because actually it might just come from the fact that I was always so different from everybody else. Like, I looked different. People would expect me to be different already. And so because of that, there's a huge freedom to that, because then people are already expecting you to be quirky and do something different. Surprise them. I say do that and run with it. Because why not? Everything is built. There's these things that are built in that society expects you to be like this or do this or behave in this way. And, you know, as long as you're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting other people, you're hopefully not doing irreparable damage to nature, you do you, right?
If people want to follow you in your work, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Soraya Earth. My website is soraya.earth. Substack is also Soraya Earth. And then if you want to find out more about All the Elements, which is the community that I run for people creating change on diversity in the UK outdoors, that's alltheelements.co. And love to see you there.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
You've been listening to Zeno. To stay up to date with our monthly episodes, you can sign up to our newsletter at zenocast.org or follow us on Instagram at @Zeno_pod. Our theme music is composed by Alex Julian Edwards.